Welcome into Man vs. Machine, where we bring Ed Feng in, put his numbers up against the odds makers, see what 3 best college football games he likes this week. Let's bring him in. Ed Feng, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing great. How you doing, Drew Martin?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. Excited to hear your opinion on these 3 games, and also some college football topics with the college football playoff numbers coming out and putting them up against your numbers, seeing if there's any difference. So let's get right into it, man. In the Big Ten, we got Penn State versus Michigan State. This one on Fox, 12 noon Eastern kick. Looks like we got some big movement here, Ed, as far as sidewise goes. It opened -13. Now down to -8 at Bet Online. A 48 is the total. How are you betting this one?
Yeah, actually, I've been thinking about the total in this game, and I find it pretty fascinating. 48 is a pretty small number, and you might think that's kind of fair. Michigan State, Mark D'Antonio's pulled off a miracle up in East Lansing. I expected this team to be terrible, possibly below FBS average. They have been quite respectable. Probably a top 30 team, definitely a top 35 team. And the defense has been incredible. It's a unit that I thought would struggle with a lot of the talent they lost from last season, but they've been particularly good. And I think that's one of the reasons why the markets have this number at 48. But one thing that I'm looking at this game, Penn State's explosive. We all know about Saquon Barkley. We all know about Trace McSorley. And the one thing that I really kind of sticks out at me in this game is that Michigan State hasn't played an offense that can really throw the ball. If you look at their opponents, they played Notre Dame, but that's a team that really wants to run the ball on you. Brandon Wimbush is not a guy that's going to throw. Just look at the rest of their opponents. Really haven't played anyone that can throw the ball. Penn State, Trace McSorley can throw the ball. I think it's a much different situation. I think Penn State does score a lot of points in this game against a defense that has looked good in Michigan State. On the other side of the ball, a little more concerned about Michigan State getting points against a very good Penn State defense. Brian Lewerke has been better throwing the ball recently. He's also an incredible athlete, really good runner. I think I think they can score some points. I don't know how many points they score, but with a number as low as 48, I like the over in this game.
Yeah, and if you shop around right now on SBR odds, you can actually find it as low as 47.5, and that one is at Bookmaker. So we'll give you 47.5, taking the over in Penn State versus Sparty for Ed Feng in the first game. On to the 4 o'clock slate. We got Bedlam, Oklahoma at Oklahoma State in Stillwater. Looks like Oklahoma State laying 2.5 pretty much across the board. If you like the Oklahoma side, you can find a 3 at Bet Online right now. 76.5 the total at Bookmaker. How you betting this one, Ed?
Yeah, this was an interesting game where I was looking both over on the total and then Oklahoma side. I actually decided that I like the side a little bit more. By my numbers, this is a combination of team rankings that take margin of victory and adjust for strength of schedule. I also have yards per play metrics that I adjust for strength of schedule. There's also a lot of market data in there. The model has Oklahoma as the better team. So you would expect this line to not favor Oklahoma State by 2.5, 3 points. You would expect either less or even on the side of Oklahoma. And the other interesting aspect of this game is Mason Rudolph is listed as questionable. He's the quarterback for Oklahoma State. Has been explosive this season. Really good at throwing the deep ball. He has a foot injury. Apparently was hobbling around at the end of last week's game, a game that they won. He obviously plays in this game unless suddenly he breaks. There's no question that he plays, but if he's hobbled, I think that even pushes it more in the favor of Oklahoma. Oklahoma is on the road, but the numbers kind of definitely like Oklahoma at +2.5. And I think with just any kind of question about Oklahoma State's best player, their quarterback, I think that makes me lean even further that way.
And Ed, just to follow up on that, with Oklahoma State being favored about 2.5 or 3, and you bring up the point that Oklahoma, it's too much in terms of numbers to the Sooners. But what about it being in Stillwater, Oklahoma State at home, in the house that T. Boone Pickens built? How much do you actually factor in their home field advantage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I factor it in. They do get credit for playing at home. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely in my model. But it still favors on the side Oklahoma. And there's a couple of other injury issues with Oklahoma State. They've had some guys dinged up on their offensive line. It looks like they're all healthy according to the injury report. That's another reason to side with the Sooners.
All right, Ed, moving on to Conference USA in the 7 o'clock Eastern slate. We got 407, 408, the rotation numbers here. UTSA versus FIU. This one opened 6.5, down to -4 for San Antonio. 51.5 the total at 5 dimes right now. How are you betting this CUSA game in Miami on Saturday?
Yeah, Conference USA in Miami, and I see two teams that have rising offenses but struggling defenses. On the UTSA side, they've been pretty good with Dalton Sturm at quarterback. It was a guy that was only completing about 56% of his passes last year. That's up to 65% this year. They're not particularly explosive, but it's an offense that's definitely been better. On the other side, you have Florida International. Butch Davis took over that program this year, and he's been getting a lot better play with Alex McGuff at quarterback. These are two defenses that struggle. UTSA's defense was a unit that we expected to be pretty good, was about FBS average last year. They're not quite at that pace this season. So for those reasons, I like over, what was it, 51? We have 51 right now?
Yeah, 51.5 right now at 5 dimes.
Yep.
Okay, so
it just seems like a really low number when both the offenses are the better units on the field.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I guess one thing I would bring up, down there in South Florida, you always got to watch out weather-wise. Stuff comes up quick. Do you worry about that at all?
Yeah, I checked the weather forecast. It's 80 and sunny on Saturday.
Wait, what? It's 80 and sunny? Okay. Well, good stuff, Ed. Always ready with that one. I agree with you. FIU quarterback situation, Alex McGuff. He's really come into his own senior year, kind of leading that offense. They've looked pretty good. I think this number looks pretty short as well. So 51.5, liking it to the over. Can find that at 5 dimes. Also Oklahoma +3 at Bet Online, and the over in the Penn State Michigan State game. That's all correct, Ed?
Absolutely, and I really love when I get the Drew Martin lean on one of my plays here too on that UTSA over.
I don't know. Could be the kiss of death. Who knows? But going with those three plays, Ed. Find Ed on Twitter at The Power Rank, and his work at thepowerrank.com. And Ed, I was there seeing all your numbers. I know you're big into the college football playoff. What'd you think about the show coming out, I guess, on Halloween night? What in your numbers against what the committee had, in particular Penn State?
Yeah, so Penn State was 7th in the committee rankings. I think that's fair if you're trying to look at what we know of the best teams in the nation right now. But what I do is I try to project what the probability that each team is going to make the playoffs. Not how good they are, but what's the chance that they're going to end in the committee's Final Four at the end of the season. And to do that calculation, you really have to look at the rest of the schedule. And Penn State really has a pretty easy road the rest of the schedule. The rest of the way. They're at Michigan State this weekend, a game we already talked about. They're a pretty big favorite in that game. I have it at about 75% that they win that game, and that is by far the lowest win probability the remainder of the season. Now, they're not going to win the Big Ten East. They already have a straight up, they lost to Ohio State last weekend. Ohio State would have to lose twice. That's very unlikely. So it's about a 7% chance that happens and they somehow win the Big Ten East. But that might be an advantage because Penn State would be sitting at 11-1. They would not lose on championship week, and they would not fall down. It could be that other teams get bumped up as they win conference championship games. But Penn State is not out of this playoff picture by any means. I see a scenario in which they go 11-1, sit at home on the championship weekend, and kind of sneak in as that 3 or 4 seed. As other teams lose. I mean, clearly it would be better if some of the favorites in the other conference championship games lost. If an Ohio State lost to Wisconsin in a Big Ten championship game, for example, if Oklahoma goes undefeated, if they lost in the Big 12, that would obviously help Penn State. Those are the types of upsets we haven't seen in the last 3 years on teams that are in the top 4, but that doesn't mean we're not going to see them. So yeah, that was my interesting result from the weekend.
Yeah, Ned, it's kind of interesting because it's like the roles are reversed with Penn State and Ohio State from last year, huh?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're going to be sitting at 11-1. they're going to have one loss to a very good Ohio State team. And, I think, it could definitely be reversed. I mean, obviously, if Ohio State wins the Big Ten, I think they're in. But we'll see. We'll see what happens as we go down the road.
And Ed, I know I'll ask you a couple questions off the cuff, so if you don't know, it's okay. But what about two-loss team making it in this year? Do your numbers say anything off of that, or what do you think about that happening this year?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Drew. And I actually coded that up last year. I think it's about a 21% chance that a two-loss team makes it in. That's small. It's about 1 in 5, so it's unlikely to happen. But I just think from the past history of the last 3 years, we haven't seen that happen. And that's because the favorites in the conference championships, like the teams that are 1, 2, 3, they've all won. And we expect that. We expect that to happen more on average more. But there's always that 25 to 30% chance that an upset's going to happen in one of those games. We'll get a little bit more of a chaos scenario, and that's when you see a two-loss team making the college football playoff.
Okay. And what about a non-Power 5 team making it? Do you have any numbers out on that?
Yeah, I do. My simulation makes a number of assumptions, and one of them is that the committee is not going to treat Power 5, Group of 5 teams that well. And we saw that last night. I think Central Florida is 18th. We went back a little bit on Twitter on that last night. There's not a lot of respect for a pretty amazing turnaround for that program. Drew, I know you've been on these guys since the beginning of the season. It was a pretty awesome call. The offense has gone from one of the 25 worst to one of the 25 best in college football this year. Scott Frost is unlikely to be the coach there next year with what's going on. But you can kind of see that level of disrespect in putting them 18th. I think a lot of the numbers, guys that I look at, my own stuff, have Central Florida higher than that. I think they deserve a little bit more credit. They're probably going to win the remainder of those games, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what the committee does with them.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting breakdown to see what happens, and you got to remember UCF and USF will play each other in the last game of the season, so that will be a fun one. But yeah, anything else you want to bring up as far as the college football playoff numbers go?
Yeah, no, that's it. One thing, we were talking about Penn State sneaking in as a team that doesn't play on championship weekend. I had the same type of prediction last year for Louisville. So if you remember last year, Louisville just had one loss to Clemson. They weren't going to win their division because of that loss, but they looked like, they were really high in the committee rankings, and they looked like they could have slid in the very end. I think with the way it broke down, they wouldn't have done that. They ended up losing twice. So, the conversation was for naught. But it would have been nice last year to see exactly how the committee would have treated like a one-loss team that didn't win their division with a two-loss conference champions, say from the Pac-12. I think that would have been really interesting to see what the committee did. We don't know what the committee is going to do. And so, is my simulation making some assumptions about Penn State that might not actually happen? Sure, that's a possibility, but I'm really interested to see how that plays out.
Okay, and just real quick, if you had to pick a conference that's going to be left out, which conference would you pick?
Oh man, Pac-12.
Pac-12 left out.
I mean, if Washington even going to make it, they're already at one loss. They still have to go to Stanford, who looks respectable when they have Bryce Love. Not so much otherwise. USC is clearly disappointed with that second loss to Notre Dame, and Sam Darnold, not quite being as good as we expected. So, yeah, I think it's a rough road for the Pac-12.
All right, man. Well, hey, great show, great breakdown, Ed. Find him on Twitter at @ThePowerRank. His work, it's a great resource at thepowerrank.com. I check it out all the time. Great numbers. So, Ed, appreciate you joining the show. Good luck this week, and we'll talk to you next week.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.